Hi everyone, welcome to ELI, the place where you get your daily dose of inspiration for entrepreneurship. And today we have with us Mr. Ajay Ramasubramaniam, who is the founder of Startup Réseau, which is a tech entrepreneurship ecosystem connecting startups with corporates. Hi Ajay, welcome to ELI.
Hi, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on this talk, and it's absolute pleasure to be here.
I would request you to introduce yourself to our audience, please.
Sure. So like you just spoke about it, my name is Ajay Ramasubramaniam. I'm a founder of Startup Réseau. I've been in the startup ecosystem in India for the past 8 years, setting up incubators, accelerators with a wide bunch of partners and sponsors, as you may know it. But Startup Réseau is in my own entrepreneurial venture, which I started about 2.5 years back, with the sole objective of building out accelerators and entrepreneurship development programs and innovation labs in emerging markets. So while we are headquartered in Mumbai, India, we operate across India, Southeast Asia, and Africa.
Okay. Tell us a bit more about Startup Research, what it is about, and what are the different services that we are offering.
Sure. So the name Startup Rezo itself, the first part is a more obvious one or straightforward one. It directly tells who are TG or target audiences, it's startups. And Rezo is a French word for network, and our business is built on a network of four pillars, which are by themselves our business verticals, as I can say. The first one is enterprise. So we work with extremely large corporates, Fortune 500 companies, large Indian companies, multinationals, for whom we help them set up and operate startup accelerators and innovation labs. So just like startups are all the time innovating, iterating, and building out stuff, corporates that have been around for 10 years, 50 years, 100 years, if they do not innovate, they can lag behind in the race. So they're constantly looking at innovation, and they recognize that there's a whole bunch of startups out there, young people with experience who are building out stuff to solve enterprise grade problems, consumer problems, and corporates are looking at finding ways in which they can reduce their time to market when it comes to innovation. And that's the reason why they set up accelerators, innovation labs, corporate venture capital funds. But the struggle or the challenge that they face is that a lot of times they're not equipped to run and operate this. So we come in as a turnkey operator, we help them structure and operationalize it. So about 70% of our time, revenue, everything is aligned to a lot of the corporate accelerators and innovation labs that we run. The second vertical is capital. 2022 is a year that we have earmarked for starting to make early stage or pre-seed kind of investments. For now, we are looking at East Africa as a market where we're looking at deploying some early stage capital, for a simple reason that we have been operating there for about a year and a half, and that ecosystem is much more nascent than India. So the rupee or the dollar can run more than a mile than it does over here, and we're looking at making very early stage investments, typically in the dollar 10k to 25k range, which unfortunately in India you can obviously syndicate, but for a strategic reason we have started to look at Africa for doing that. So funding is the second one, or capital is the second one. Our third vertical is market access. So we do two things. One is companies from growth markets, like whether it's North America, Europe, Southeast Asia, who are looking at expanding into India. We run structured market access accelerators and programs which allows them to soft land in India. But our by far biggest program is Startup Bridge Canada, which takes Indian entrepreneurs to Canada. Now, Canada, as a part of the extended North American ecosystem, is pretty much something which not too many entrepreneurs are well aware of. And me and a colleague, having worked in the Canadian government for considerable time, and then me having worked with a Canadian university-backed accelerator in India, we know the Canadian ecosystem fairly well. And from our perspective, companies that are looking at getting into North America, instead of trying to push hard and get into the US, Canada makes a safer, better alternative. So we have been running Startup Bridge Canada for the last 12 months, and 108 Indian companies have soft landed in Canada through that program. And this is something that we'll continue to build on. Likewise, we work with Government of Australia and Government of UK as well to run programs to bring companies to India. Our last vertical is services stroke advisory, under which we operate our own brand of boot camps and pre-accelerators and accelerators, focusing on youth entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs, domains like fintech and AI. We also own three very strong conference properties. One is the Mumbai AI Summit, which is vertically focused on AI as a domain. and two corporate innovation summits, one focusing on Africa called the East Africa Corporate Innovation Summit, and one focusing on India called as Next. Likewise, we are very strong in fintech and run a very strong fintech community under Fintech OI or Fintech Open Innovation. So that's the reason why we call ourselves an ecosystem, because while startups are at the core of everything we do, we have built out these four verticals which every startup will require at some point or the other. They're always going to require enterprise customers, they're going to require capital, they're going to require market access, and they're going to require platforms where they can express themselves, where they can engage with different stakeholders. So that's how our business is very interconnected.
Okay. So speaking of ecosystem model, I think we are doing a lot of diverse things. But would be very curious to know how we make our revenue. What is our revenue model?
Sure. So like I said, we are bootstrapped. We haven't yet gone about trying to raise capital. In future, at some point, we will, because that will allow us to scale fast. Because what we are trying to do here is build out a brand. So just like in the international market, you have Techstars and Plug and Play and Founders Factory and a whole bunch of them, which are pretty much the ones that we want to be when it comes to emerging market. You definitely need a dose of ammunition to go after and build out at scale. So we definitely will go out and raise capital at some point in time. But today we are bootstrapped. We are pretty much based on revenues, and that's why I said about 70% of our time goes into building out programs for corporates and enterprises, because that's where a bulk of our revenue comes. Having said that, because we also run programs for governments, we get paid a fee, a retainer, to kind of build out those programs and execute or deliver. And last is sponsorships, particularly for events, conferences, and more smaller ticket stuff, where brand visibility is something which is important for XYZ brand. They put in some sponsorship which gives them the kind of mileage or the visibility they require. So the retainer, the fee for service, and sponsorship, these are three avenues of revenue for us.
Okay. Also, tell us a bit about the journey of Startup Réseau, like how were the initial days and how it all started to where it is now. I mean, what were the series of events that you have gone through to reach here?
That's a very good or a great question, because just yesterday we had our team meeting after quite some time, because with the pandemic, for a very long time we were trying to keep people away from office or getting them to travel. Sorry, but in the past few months we have resumed office, but we don't get everyone in on a daily basis. Vaccination and a whole bunch of other issues as well. Having said that, when we started in August 2019, 1st of August 2019 is when we commenced operations. The first 9 months were fairly smooth, because for a simple reason that me and the team, we had worked in the similar space before, and there were some businesses by virtue of which they came to us much easier. So the first 9 months we surprised ourselves when it came to the kind of revenues that we were able to generate. But surprise, when it came to March 2020, just like the rest of the world kind of started facing challenges. I mean, our business was still fortunate to continue generating revenues, but compared to the first 9 months, the next 12 months were fairly tough. A lot of contracts got cancelled. A lot of contracts got stripped down to almost 50%. When some of them they went unpaid. So if you look at April 2020 to March 2021, I would say that almost 52% of the contracts that we signed, they never kind of hit the bank account, which was kind of tough as a business owner. Having said that, again, since April 2021, things have changed for the good, changed for the better, because a lot of spends have started to increase again. Again, people have started putting out programs. So we're in a much better space today. There are a lot of businesses which struggle to get their feet back up on the ground. There are a lot of businesses which struggle to kind of come out of such impacts. But I think I wouldn't complain. Yes, there can be lots more done, but for a young business which is just about 2.5 years old, I think we are doing okay in terms of being out there, winning customers, working with some really solid, reputable brands, and generating revenue. So we definitely are profitable, but at the same time, our aspiration, our goal is much bigger. The other thing is, even though the pandemic has had a lot of negative impact on growth or business in general on life, I think one of the things that it has allowed to do as a business is to go after markets that we wouldn't have gone after this early. Case in example is Africa. So while Africa was on our radar to do in 2022, 2023, what the pandemic and the virtual world allowed us to do was to start experimenting very early on. So exactly a year back, 29th of Jan 2021, we did a soft launch of our Africa operations. But in the last 1 year, we have done 5 pre-accelerators in the continent. We have partnered with some really marquee, reputed institutions and brands. We have had 67 startups go through our accelerators in Africa. We have generated decent revenue in that market. So all of these wouldn't have been possible if it was not for the virtual world. So yes, while the pandemic has kind of dented business in general, I think it's very important that you use that opportunity to kind of see where else you can add value, how you can add value, what are the new streams of business or new business models that you can actually kind of go after. And that is what entrepreneurship is all about. And because you're talking at the Entrepreneur Lounge of India, I think it's very important to pass on that message to people, to viewers, whoever is watching this. That's, I think, one of the core qualities that an entrepreneur needs to have, or a team of entrepreneurs needs to have, is to kind of always be hustling, always be looking out for opportunities, never feel bogged down by anything that hits you. There are so many things in life that happens when you're not looking around or when you're not planned for something, but one should look at it as an opportunity and try to make the best of it. So in that way, I think one big takeaway for us from the pandemic, apart from everything we do, is that we're actually able to build out a completely new business in a completely new environment, in a new continent, and we're able to actually scale it. So that's a massive takeaway for me.
Speaking of challenges, can you tell us what are the different challenges that you have faced so far while building and growing this model? So you have already spoken about the pandemic, but what are the other nuances of running a ecosystem-based model?
I think so. While it is very exciting for a lot of people to work in organizations or setups like ours, whether it is incubators, accelerators, an ecosystem builder, like you said, uh, I think talent is a big challenge, right? Because from the outside, it might look very rosy. It might look like a place I want to be in and work at. But one needs to understand that when you're working in an ecosystem enabler environment like ours, you need to don multiple hats. Yes, at some point when the scale is much bigger, you can have functional responsibilities. But I think the biggest challenge has been availability of talent and their expectations. Uh, we have had to let go of people, we have brought in new people, and it's something that I have not experienced just today. Even prior to this, I used to run a fairly large meta accelerator in India, ran it for 6 years. While we managed to retain people for with us for fairly long, looking around, I used to always kind of see that uh, capacity building has been a challenge. So anyone who's operating an incubator and accelerator, it's a common feature or a common item on their list when it comes to challenges that they face. Um, Otherwise, I don't look at a lot of these things as challenges. I think it's a part and parcel of any business. But yeah.
Speaking of talent, I think this is a common challenge across the industry. Every founder finds it tough to find the right people for his or her venture. So, can you give some guidelines or some working models which can be applied by any founder to find the right person?
Yeah, it has always got to be a win-win in my eyes, right? I mean, as a founder, you need to find someone who you're able to retain longer term, work with longer term, because if you're investing time, resources, efforts in building up someone, you also are looking at an ROI in one way or the other. Likewise, when I look at it from a talent perspective, I want to join a company which yes, it hires me for my capabilities, what I bring to the table, but also it gives me an opportunity to upskill myself, to grow the ladder within the organization, to earn more, to get exposed to newer kind of challenges and avenues which otherwise I have not had access to. So I think from a founder perspective, yes, you got to be selfish when it comes to hiring. You need to find people that kind of are able to kind of bring something to the table and allow you to kind of fast track and build towards the mission. But as a founder, you also need to be having I mean, that's about entrepreneurship, right? You need to be having that empathy, because if someone is buying into your vision and joining your company, you also need to give them a fair chance to kind of grow in life. So you need to kind of work towards it. You cannot kind of look at people as employee number X or employee number Y. You need to kind of look at them as an individual, and individual with aspirations, individual having vision for what they want to achieve, individual who wants to kind of do something beyond just having a job description. So as a founder, you need to be open to having those conversations and helping people grow in life. Yeah.
Okay. As a founder, you are expected to stay energetic, and you are expected to drive your venture and the people who work with the venture. However, there will be instances where you feel tired or restless, or you may lose the focus, and when that happens, the business also suffers. So can you tell us, how do you manage such situations where you lose focus?
Take a break. It's very important. So I think that's something that not just as founders, but Indians in general, we do not follow as a principle. But I think it's very important. So in the past I've worked with Canadians, and I mean Canadians for the longest. I spent about 10, 11 years working exclusively with Canadians, first with the government and then with the university. And one thing that was common was that every quarter they would take a week off. Every quarter, it was either around. I mean, probably even their years are built out that way. In one quarter you have a Christmas, the next quarter you have Easter, then you have the summer holidays, then you have end of summer holidays, and people would always take a week off. I think that's very important, because a lot of times it's not about working for 11 or 12 months and then taking a month off. It's not going to work. And a lot of times people pride upon themselves saying, "Arey, maine 3 saal se chutti nahi liya. I've just been working for 3 years." Probably you're doing disservice to yourself and probably the people you're working with. So I think I mean, I would presume that every organization has a leave policy where in a year you're entitled to X number of holidays. Either you plan your work in such a way that every quarter you're able to, sometimes even taking those 3 or 4 days off, it does a lot to you in terms of the mental space. I think that's the most important one. And also physically you need to have that breather. So so something that I've tried doing is in every quarter or every 3 to 4 months, try and take a short break here and there. Maybe I'm just doing nothing. I'm just sitting at home doing nothing, but it's important. Likewise, even on weekends, if unless and until it's kind of really required, I make sure that Friday night, once I'm back from work, Friday night, Saturday, Sunday is just me time. Whether I'm just sitting on a lounge and watching a movie, or maybe I'm doing nothing, sleep it out. Maybe read a book just to kind of get your head out of the other work that is there on your head. So I think it's very important to kind of detox in whatever way that you can. And I would also encourage people who are working for you to kind of adopt that as a mantra. I try and tell people, but it's up to an individual whether they want to do it or no. But I think in the longer run, it's kind of beneficial, because there are a lot of young people. So our team is completely young people who are probably just little over than half my age. So I'm not very old. I'm like 41, but still, when you're working with people who are maybe 23, 24, 25, you definitely see that they they like what they're doing. They're spending long hours at work, but sometimes you need to kind of just take a break. You need to kind of ensure that you're taking care of yourself. So it's I think it's important.
How do you manage your time on a day-to-day basis? In other words, can you tell us, how does your calendar look like for a typical day?
Yeah. So nowadays, I mean, for at least for the last few years, I think I absolutely maintain a calendar. Whether it is someone who wants to meet me or talk to me, I say that, hey boss, first send me a proper calendar request, because I want it to be on my calendar. And likewise, even if I think of something which is a to-do list of sorts, I just put it on my calendar, and I strike it off at the end of the day. If there are 10 things and I have been able to do 8, I move it promptly to the next day. But it's very important that you have a practice of maintaining a calendar, which is not just calendar for meetings or conversations like this, but also if it is a personal task that you have given yourself, just put it on your calendar. Ensure that you're doing it, even if it's for the future date. just ensure that you put it and you're sticking to it. I think productivity is very important. I think one of the things, and the reason why a lot of companies have tried to get back to an office space rather than work from home is that I think while in the initial days of the lockdown, people were finding it more convenient to be at home and work. Uh, I think after the first 3 to 6 months, I think productivity started taking a hit because there was no border between your personal and professional. And as much as it is great to be at home, be around family, I think after a point, you cannot kind of balance yourself in two boats. So I think productivity started taking a hit. Uh, Over a period of time, virtual world or just being on Zoom calls and screens has its own level of fatigue. People might think that the fatigue is just visual. It can be mental. It can be physical because uh, not all chairs are ergonomical and kind of support your body structure the way your back is supposed to be, neck is supposed to be. So I think productivity started taking a huge hit there, and that's why I think it's important that people meet face to face. They interact as much as possible, and that is again something that I keep telling people that if and when events and conferences or other things start happening, you should go out and meet people because it's and don't go out and meet people just wearing the hat of the job that you do. It's important to have conversations. I think as human beings, that's what makes us different than other living creatures, right? We have conversations, we meet people, we have different interests, and a lot of times it's very important that we strike conversations with people. So yeah.
What would you say is the meaning of entrepreneurship for you? How do you define the term entrepreneur?
Creating and adding value in whatever way, whatever you're doing, whether it's a product, it's a service. Like, so if people ask me how would I define what we do, I think it is consulting plus services. But in every business, whether you're building a physical product, whether you're just creating convenience for someone, whether you're helping someone solve a problem, I think it's very important that you're able to create value, either create value from ground up or add value to whatever is already there. So I think that is why I guess having that quality of empathy as an entrepreneur, or as a startup is very important. You need to have empathy for your customer, your stakeholders, and always focus on creating value for them.
Okay. My final question for you. Tell us about the lessons that you have learned as an entrepreneur, which we can take away and apply to our ventures.
Take lessons. Wow, that's a very broad one. So I don't even know how to kind of encapsulate that. But so I draw a lot of parallels between sports, management, entrepreneurship, because I feel that all of them they teach a lot of things, and I think at the core of it, what you would find. So if you were to compare just sports and entrepreneurship, and I'm a big sports fan, and when I say sports, I essentially mean cricket,
Mhm.
but not that I don't like other sports. But I think for me, I think between sports and entrepreneurship, I think the biggest common factor is the team, and what a team sport or working in a team kind of teaches. And when I talk of entrepreneurship or startup, I'm talking of smaller companies. Because there are decons out there or unicorns out there which also are called startup, but those are like
Mhm.
proper structured big organizations. I'm talking of much smaller companies because that gives you an opportunity to know people as individuals, especially when you're smaller companies of 10 people, 20 people, maybe even up to 30, 40 people.
Mhm.
You can personally kind of know who works for you or who is a part of your setup. When it's like 4,000 people, you obviously cannot know 4,000 people. But when you're a smaller startup, I think it gives you a huge opportunity because you're going to have people coming from different socioeconomic backgrounds. You're going to have people coming from different cultures. You're going to have people coming with different academic background. So when you're a mix or a melting pot of such people, I think there are a lot of things to take away from each other. Many things that we might take for granted, for
Mhm.
someone else, it might not be. So that's why, I mean, even if you look at technology, the reason why people say that when you're talking of technology like artificial intelligence, it is very important to have diversity. diversity in terms of not just man, women, or just the gender part of it, but also people coming in from different cultures, different countries, because everyone is wired very differently. So even when you're looking at technologies like artificial intelligence, which is probably one of the bigger game changers for next decade, people say that AI research needs to have people from different backgrounds, different cultures, different religions, because when everyone is wired differently and they are contributing to it, that is when AI really becomes strong. So similarly, if you look at teams, it's very important not to have biases. It
Mhm.
is very important to build a multicultural team, because yes, you're building something, you're going to go out there and probably create value for someone. But if you're bringing different kinds of people together under one roof to work together, I think it also contributes in a big way in your own personal development. So for me, I think the one biggest factor as a takeaway from startup or any entrepreneurial journey is being able to bring together diverse set of people, because everyone grows, and more than anything else, I think even from a personal development standpoint, it plays a big role.
Okay. Uh, I think on this point, we have come to the end of the session. Thank you for your time, Ajay, and our best wishes for Startup Reserve.
Thank you so much. It was pleasure chatting with you and taking those questions, and look forward to staying connected and engaged with Entrepreneur Launch of India.